This week on Dig Me Out. With your hosts, Jason Zia and Tim Minichi.
Jay, we're back again with another episode thanks to our Dig Me Out Union on Patreon. You can help us make the next episode happen by joining us at dmounion.com or digmeoutunion.com. Of course, I stumble over the second sentence. I've only done this 500 times.
You'll get there at maybe 600.
I'll keep working on it. WNBC. Oh, pig vomit.
It's been a while since I saw that.
Yeah. Great film. Let's talk about some great albums that were in our poll. That's right. Our episode is a poll result episode where the albums go into our hopper via the Dig Me Out website. You go there, you suggest an album. Anybody can put a suggestion in there that's listening or following us on the socials. And it goes into our Patreon community. 9 albums every month. They vote and we check one of them out. And usually it's either something that we've totally heard of and we're not surprised by it in terms of, oh yeah, we know who this band is. Or it's something obscure that I've never heard of. So this particular poll, Jay, had a lot of stuff. I think I recognized maybe 3 of the bands.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of stuff in here that I didn't know.
Yep, me too.
So let's get through the what came in for this poll. Richard Waterman suggested Tears for Fears Elemental. Obviously, we heard Tears for Fears. Eric Peterson suggested Jax. That's Jaks. Hollywood Blood Capsules. Willie Dillon, Link. These Are Not Fall Colors. Those 2 I was not familiar with.
No.
Kyle Bittner, Super Suckers, The Evil Power of Rock and Roll. Yes, we've known the Super Suckers.
I was familiar with that one.
Yeah, and then Scott Neiman suggested Polvo's Celebrate the New Dark Age, which we've actually done a Polvo episode. So we're like half and half here. Then Mike Bond suggested Matter Rose, Bring It Down. That was a name I knew, but I had never listened to anything of theirs. Joe suggested Memory Dean, Shake It Up, and Adam Smith suggested Bird Brains, Let's Be Nice. I'm not familiar with either of those. You?
Well, that Bird Brain album cover is very familiar to me. I don't know why.
You know why I think it looks familiar? It was because by the time we were like going through dollar bins of CDs, it would have been at the very start where the bees are.
Yeah.
You probably just saw it
right.
repeatedly.
I think you're right.
It's like the ammonia cover.
I think I even texted you when I pulled the albums out of the hopper. I had a double check and I even texted you because I'm like, this album looks so familiar. We reviewed this, right? It's not coming up in our episodes, but I know I've reviewed this record.
And we did not. But it does. It looks like about 20 different possible bands from the 90s could have used that cover. The last pick was Jonathan Fire Eater. That was Wolf Songs for Lambs. That was by Jeff Petrin. Jay, I don't know if you know this, but Jonathan Fire Eater, the members of that band went on to form the Walkmen, who you should know because
okay, that's right. Yes,
you played with them once.
Mm-hmm.
So this poll did not go as I expected, in that there were basically 2 runaway candidates for this poll, or only 2 of the albums broke 20%.
It was like if it was a horse race, you'd have 2 horses just out front the whole race, and everybody else 1 mile behind.
Yep. So Memory Dean was in last with no votes. And then with 3% of the vote, there was Bird Brain, 5% Jax. Tied at 8% were Link and the Super Suckers, along with Jonathan Fire Eater. Then you get up to Polvo with 11%, and that's wherever they get left in the dust. Tears for Fears, Elemental, second place with 27%, which means Matter Rose, Bring It Down, suggested by Mike Bond, won it with 30% of the vote. And I think that's representative of the comments for this. John Pennycock let him off. He said, Matter Rose because it reminds me of student house parties in the 90s. Kyle Bittner said, regardless of it being my pick, I have to go with the self-proclaimed greatest rock and roll band in the world, the Almighty Super Suckers. So he went against himself. We've had that happen on a couple occasions here where people have suggested an album and then yet picked a different album because it was just a better idea, I guess. There was some more on the Super Suckers, but he said, this album makes me giddy for fans of the Helicopters, Turbo Negro, the New Bomb Turks, and Cosmic Psychos. All bands that we have talked about on this podcast, Jay. How about that?
Yeah, I think we've done a pretty good job covering that scene.
Yeah.
Over time.
I've
chipped away at it.
Become a Cosmic Psychos fan and actually got a Cosmic Psychos record not too long ago. Mm-hmm. Joe Royland says, since they've got a new album out, it would be cool to revisit the Tears for Fears album, even if it was just Roland Orzabal running the show at the time. It's either that or the Matter Rose album. So Joe was tuned into the top two vote getters. Johnny Hooper said, Jonathan Fire Eater 100%. Though this album is used as a failure, it really isn't. Its sound predates where the Walkman would eventually end up at, and with better results. The Wolf Songs for Lambs has plenty to offer in its own right. Scott Witt said, I choose Tears for Fears. Always liked this band and curious what everyone's opinion on it will be. This is one of the two where it's just Roland. I think the follow-up, Raoul, is great. And that's a band, Jay, sidetrack for a sec. I forget how many albums that Tears for Fear has in the 80s versus the 90s. Like, I think that all their albums came out in the 80s and they were just done, but that's actually not accurate.
Well, the good part about them not winning is it leaves them open for a prime in the 80s episode. I think they would be a very good candidate for us to dive into that 90s catalog and talk about it.
Eric Peterson did a breakdown of major label versus indie label for each of the bands, and it came up with only 3 of the bands suggested were on major labels. That's Tears for Fears, Memory Dean, and Jonathan Fire Eater. Now, Jonathan Fire was on DreamWorks. They might have been considered a major label, but I don't think that they were like that big, huge of a label. They were kind of a mess because they were gone in like 5 or 10 years, and they were backed with like a ton of money. The other one that he mentioned is Capricorn Records. Was Capricorn a big deal in the 90s? I don't really remember. I remember them being a 70s record label that was had a lot of stuff out.
Yeah, I mean, I know the name. I'm struggling to think of an artist that I would associate with that label.
I think of them in the same as like, what was the Kiss's label? Asylum?
Oh, Casablanca?
Casablanca. Like Capricorn and Casablanca, and those kind of starts with a C, obviously, in the 70s.
Macon, Georgia.
What?
It was started in Macon, Georgia.
Oh, I've been there. Not to the Capricorn recording studio or record label, but just to Macon, Georgia. That's neither here nor there.
Marshall Tucker Band.
Oh, but
Marshall Tucker Band and Dixie Dregs. Just trying to give you a reference for Capricorn Records.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I don't see anything 90s there to your original question.
Molly Hatchet?
They started in the relaunched in the 90s in Nashville. Widespread Panic, Cake, 311.
That's right.
Government Mule.
I believe that the Widespread Panic album that we did was a Capricorn release.
There you go.
There we go.
See, now, are you glad I closed that loop?
You closed it up. Thank you. God, we're so off the target there. Let's get back to the comments. Tyler Stoberg said, I don't know. I've heard that Tears record, more curiosity than a satisfying listen. I'm going with Matter Rose. Jeff Gentis said, agree with Tyler. I am already familiar with that Jonathan Fire Eater album, thanks to Buying it after reading Meet Me in the Bathroom. I really like the Walkman. Every album is at least a better EP, including Hamilton's collab with Rostam, but the Jonathan Fire album is a bit of a mess. If we ever cover it, it'll be a debate whether it's a hot mess or a hot with double T mess. It's a real hot mess.
Hot.
Gavin said, I'm taking Super Suckers as it's time they were mentioned here. This album is kind of the Super Suckers playing the Super Suckers, while I think Sacrilegious Sounds is a more authentic album. I'll take some good old rock and roll any day. Honorable mention to Matter Rose, which I enjoy. And Kyle Bittner followed up with Sacrilegious is seriously a strong album and my second favorite of theirs. They are a hardworking band that deserves more attention than they get. Vadim Taver said, he started creating a YouTube playlist for each of so you get like a song from each of the bands for the polls. So if you go to Vadim's YouTube page, you might be able to check that out. That's pretty cool. Ian McIver went Tears for Fears. Everyone knows the songs from the first two albums and the title track from the third, but it would be interesting to hear their thoughts on one of the two albums without Kurt Smith. And it would be a timely pick. And then Vadim said, Tears for Fears and Matter Rose will make for a great discussion, but I'm going with something I discovered from this poll that's speaking to me more, which is Link. Excited to check out that record, regardless if it wins. Also, apparently the pole vote EP here is a worthy album for some of you. Well, apparently it was an EP that was suggested, not a full-length album. We don't do any like QA when these things come in. We just look at the title and put it in the poll.
I do some, but
got to get the intern on that. Steve, you're fired.
I try to make sure it came out in the 90s. That it's at least available on YouTube. You know,
got it.
Other than that, there's no rule against EPs.
Technically there isn't. I mean, we've never,
even though it's labeled as an album submission, there's no, when you submit on the forum, there's no criteria that it has to be an LP.
Wow, dropping this at episode 590 something. How many have slipped by? People didn't know that. You are absolutely going to blow their minds with this. Willie Dillon said, I went with my suggestion, Link. Such a great combination of post-hardcore, emo, and indie rock. Rest in peace, Sam Jane. Also a fan of Jonathan Fire Eater. I hadn't heard Memory Dean or Bird Brain before, but I'm liking those as well. Jack's pretty raucous. I was surprised by the recording quality, but I see it was recorded by Albini, which is cool. And they had some negative things to say about Memory Dean. Chip Midnight said, I went with Matter Rose, and I've got Mary Lorson on my list of artists to try to interview. Mike Bond, Matter Rose for me, with songs as great as Swim, Beautiful John, Living a Daydream, and Lights Go Down. This is a classic album, in my opinion. Remember seeing them play Reading Festival next to Yola Tango and Buffalo Tom on a small stage back in the early 90s and blowing my teenage mind. That would be pretty cool. And then I think the poll closed at this point because Calvin Bittner said, happy to see Matter Rose take it. I wasn't familiar with them prior to this poll, and if I didn't have a horse in this race, I would have voted for this. And then Patrick Testa said, I was trying to listen to every album this month, and time ran out before I finalized my vote. I had Jax in there as my early front runner, and so that's where it landed. That Super Sucker album is great, though, and I fell in love with Matter Rose song, Lay Down Low. It sounds so much like early X. Interesting. And those are our comments from the union members at Patreon. And we didn't go over, Jay, but were you familiar with them at all?
I was not. I mean, the name was familiar to me.
Right.
But that's about it. I didn't know what to expect, and I hadn't heard them.
And this album cover and the name are totally like mid 90s kind of when I'm starting at the radio station, and I'm like looking at the CDs and I'm like, I don't know what any of these bands are. Like,
it's just a blur of bands that look like this.
Yes. There's, this is my first, sitting down with like 50 CDs and trying to like give an opinion of them at my weekly music meeting. you know, and not sound like a complete moron, because I'm like, what's the difference between these bands? I don't understand. Aren't they the same band?
You got to make the call on whether you're going to play it or not, and you're like, I mean, I don't know.
Well, I
I don't
remember
like it.
I got at one point an album where I think it might have been the Catherine album, like the first one, not the one we reviewed, but the one before that. And I was like, I don't really get this. And they were like, well, did you pick any singles? And I was like, no, I didn't really think. And they're like, well, the music director was like, yeah, well, we're going to play this one, and this one. Like, basically, he knew what CMJ was already showing. Yeah. What people were playing. So he was just adding it because, well, these other stations added it. So clearly it's good.
That's so funny. I had the exact same experience. I did that a couple times. And I remember one of the CDs I got was Joan of Arc. I think it was the band Joan of Arc. Does that sound familiar? I had the same reaction as you. It was like, I don't really like any of this. And I remember like handed it in and it was like, okay, well, we're going to play these three. It's like, all right. I don't know. I don't think I was asked to do it anymore after that. It's like, I don't know that I get some of these records. I don't know that I can be helpful.
I mean, I don't think that there was anything like nefarious going on, but I would not have been surprised if like certain record labels had been like, make sure that these songs get in rotation, and like, we'll get you some sweet, concert tickets the next time so-and-so's in town. But I have no evidence of that. I'm not casting aspersions on anyone or any particular school. Toledo. So
I feel like I'm obligated to review that Joan of Arc album at some point on the show.
You kind of are. you took a dump on it. You better revisit it at some point. But first, we should not revisit, but talk about an album we are both unfamiliar with, which is "Bring It Down" by Madder Rose. Just a little bit on the band. They were from New York City, and actually formed in Greenwich Village, which is something you associate more with the 60s as far as bands than the 90s. But they formed in 1991. Guitarist Billy Coté. It's a Cote, but then there's an accent over the E, and I'm not sure what to do with that accent. So I'm going to say Coté, because I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
And then Mary Lorson is the vocalist, and also plays guitar. And they met and basically started making music together, and they signed to was like an offshoot of Atlantic called Seed Records. So it was like an independent label, but they had distribution through Atlantic or whatever. And they were on that for their debut, Bring It Down, which came out in 1993, which is the one we're talking about. It was produced by Kevin Salem, who, like Yola Tango, he was in the band Dump Truck, and he was produced or played with bands like Freddie Johnston and Yola Tango. And so this got some play in the UK. John Peel was a fan, and he was a tastemaker over on the BBC, and he got them like the song Swim got into the UK and got charted and stuff, thanks to him liking this band. So they're kind of a bigger deal in the UK than they were in the US because of that, and the NME being fans of theirs. And so then 94, they follow this up and release Panic On. That is also on Seed, but also through Atlantic. And then in 97, they released the album Tragic Magic, and that's just on Atlantic. It's not a Seed release anymore. And then they released Hello June Fool in 1999, and then broke up. And then they got back together in 2019 and put out the album To Be Beautiful. And Mary Lorson has done bands since after the original breakup and before the reunion. She was in an a band called Saint Lo, and which Billy Coté also played guitar and did some production, and she worked with some other artists on a couple different projects. One called Piano Creeps, which is like a instrumental album, and then there's a couple other ones, but there's a lot of like side projects and stuff that happened while Meta Rose was not together. So let's get into it. Enough talking about not the album. Let's actually talk about the album. Jay, tell me one thing you liked about Bring It Down by Meta Rose.
I really like the juxtaposition between this breathy, delicate sounding voice in a band that can get pretty abrasive, but also be a little bit jangly, be a little bit kind of open and strummy and layered. They've got a lot of range musically, but typically it feels, pretty dark musically. So that juxtaposition of this band that's, flexing some muscles, getting into like things that sound shoegazy or a little bit punk. And then countering that with this voice that's, for the most part, she sings in kind of a head voice. There's quite a bit of harmonies. But, it sounds kind of pretty. So you have this constant like duality going on where, the mood is dark, but it's kind of lightened. Musically, it's dark, but it's lightened by this vocal. So I think it just creates like an interesting listen through the whole record. I also liked, they could pull off a ballad like While Away, it kind of feels a little bit traditional. It still has that dark, like haunting feel to it. But for the most part, it's a straightforward, like emotional ballad. But then they'll twist and they'll do a couple songs on here to me that at their core, if you broke down what was going on from a riff standpoint, rhythm standpoint, they're kind of just punk songs. Like 20 Foot Red, I think, and Lay Down Low are the best examples. Where if you really just listen to those parts, you could kind of envision a different production, maybe different singer, and they would be, kind of straight up late 80s punk songs. So that was interesting too, and a bit unexpected. Like you kind of get in the record the first couple tracks and it feels like it's going to be a kind of a dense, dreamy vibe, which it is, but then there's up tempo songs that at their core you're getting this energy that's got more edge and it's a little bit rocky, which was unexpected, and I enjoyed it. I think those songs were well placed in the record too, to kind of give the record a kick in the butt and keep the momentum up. The other thing I really liked was a really creative mix at times of electric guitars and acoustics. I think the song While Away is a really good example of what I'm talking about. The electric guitar is super distorted, but it's really distant. And the acoustic guitar is right in your face and very like upfront and present. and somehow they're balanced. And it's a really, I don't know how they would do this live, but on record it worked really well, where you get this depth and sort of dreary, dark vibe from this electric guitar off in the distance, but then it's plucky and present and like intimate in your headphones because of the acoustic guitar. And that they do that quite a bit on the record, where they mix in acoustics on top to give texture, so you can kind of hear those string hits and just give dimension and that dynamic. And I think as you listen to the record more and more, you start to pick up on that. It just gives you some more layers to dig into, which I enjoyed. What worked for you?
Well, a lot of this record worked for me from the jump. With Beautiful John, I was like, oh, this sounded to me like Kay Hanley singing for early Dinosaur Jr. You know, it had this raucous kind of 80s Dinosaur Jr. sound with, you know, his guitar tone sometimes on those early records is pretty brittle. And it reminded me a lot of that. But Mary Lorson's voice, I think what really works, you know, on those fast songs, she's got the energy and the you know, the ability to be like really on top of it with regards to her, where she puts her vocal. And then on like a song like While Away or Bring It Down, which kind of get into like a shoegaze meets like Mazzy Star kind of vibe that I really enjoyed. I like that there is noise with her voice when she's singing softer, and there's this balance of pretty and ugly when there's all this distortion happening and stuff, which is, you know, the same way when you listen to like My Bloody Valentine. But I think from Beautiful John, and you mentioned some of the other faster songs like 20-Foot Red and even Lights Go Down, there's some, I mean, these are really good pop songs. It's just like punk pop stuff that's happening here. And which is, if you take those and sort of rearrange the record, like this could easily be in the vein of like Slowdive, or, you know, early not Cranberries Up, Sundays or something. You know, it's a very all over the place record. And then you have what's probably the hookiest song, I think, Swim, in terms of they sing that Rose Matter part, and it just gets, you know, it's just super. But it's this over 6 minutes long. I had to imagine they made a radio version for that, because they almost like sabotage like the perfect. It should be a 3.5 minute long song.
You're talking about Swim?
Yeah.
The version I'm seeing is 2:39.
I was trying to figure out if maybe like the tracks are was mislabeled or something.
Yeah.
But it sounds like Lay Down Low is on the same track as that.
Gotcha. They combine it. Yeah, if you combine those two together, that would be 6 minutes.
But I still have 13 tracks. I don't know what's going on. I'm so confused right now. Is this going off the rails here?
The other thing that's interesting about that song is the guitar parts under it are pretty weird. I mean, I agree with you. It is hooky and melodic, but when you break down the guitar parts, there's like this trilly thing going on, and there's this bendy guitar that's using tremolo or something. They're just not parts that like you would think would you be able to kind of take for the full song. They're pretty obnoxious, but they're like the way they're mixed, the vocal comes forward and it works.
Conscious now, so you walk around, waking up to hold your ground. The river's edge, you jump right in. The current's strong, it makes you spin. Your arms in a wild rotation. Your arms in a wild rotation. Truth's enough to set you afloat. Describe the truth as
the things that, in terms of what works, it's definitely Mary Lorson, her vocal, the overall approach of the band, like going from this, up-tempo pop punkish type stuff to these much more subdued and atmospheric sounds. But I had a problem with his guitar playing. It's at times it's like weirdly amateurish, and I don't know that there's a single song that has a good guitar tone. I mean, it goes from like mediocre to like almost just sounds like rubbing two pieces of sandpaper together. Like there's no definition in it. So
yeah, for what didn't work, I'm with you on the guitar tones. I think, to my earlier point with the layering, I think they're trying to cover up and bring more tone by adding acoustics.
Right.
And I think it probably saves a lot of these songs by doing that. I just think the production overall is just inconsistent. The songs that are they're supposed to be louder feel smaller, and the songs that are quiet feel bigger. It just, the drums are flat. It just sounds, the bass tone is bad.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not a consistently produced record. I mean, some of those tracks sound fine, and other ones are like, this is not great. It definitely benefits from listening to it loud. It kind of reminds me of, at times, Catherine Wheel's Ferment, but I think that record still sounds better than this in the way that it's produced. And then her voice, I really do like it. I wouldn't mind a little more dynamic. She sings very in her head, like doesn't project a ton. And I wouldn't mind hearing more projection. Tanya Donnelly came on after this record, and it just hit me of like, oh wow, okay, yeah, this could be like, she's in the same ballpark, but she has so much more, like, I don't know, dynamic to her voice, and she projects so much more. And I couldn't help but think, with that kind of energy here, it would help quite a bit. Maybe even in particular on the harmonies. There's a lot of cool harmonies here, and you really have to listen to get them.
Yeah.
They don't pop out of the speakers. And some of that is just the singing style, but the production isn't helping it either. So those are a couple of things that didn't work for me.
Yeah, I think the mix is tough. There's a lot of cool bass stuff happening. Like in Bring It Down, when that song gets big, that bass is doing a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot of low end though.
Right.
So you're getting like it sounds like the bass on like a early 80s Cure album or something. Like it's
yeah.
It's so mid-range.
Everything's fighting for the mid-range. It's Altar Boys might be my favorite song on the record, because it's the best example of like, because the tones are more constrained, it has this like razor sharp fuzzed out bass or guitar. I don't even know what it is, but the drums are simple. They're just like tom hits, and it just creates this space. I think that like the production and her voice really work much better than any other song on the record. And I think it's just because of the simplicity. Like, it's not requiring, lush, great guitar tones. It's not a complicated mix. Just the format and presentation of the song is conducive to, what the band does best, I think.
3 years goodbye, I hardly know it. Downstairs for 6, you know where I'm really going. I sit here hardly moving, and I think I'm grooving, but I'm not feeling
I agree with you. I think the stuff that works best for me in terms of the overall, the sound, the vocal, the songwriting is like While Away and Bring It Down. I did find that the back half of the record from not back half, but from say about Sugar Sweet, Razor Pilot, Waiting for Engines, I could drop all three of those songs. I thought Pocket Full of Medicine would have been a fine closer, I guess. But those are all so samey. And it's just like 10 minutes or 12 minutes or 11, whatever it is, of unnecessary sort of slow and mid-tempo there at the end, which it's just not dynamic in the way that the earlier stuff is.
Yep, my notes kind of trail off there in terms of I like Living a Daydream. I like Pocket Full of Medicine especially as a closer. It's just kind of a fun, waltzy. It's maybe the best guitar playing on the record. And also sonically sounds like one of the better songs. But that stretch of Sugar Sweet, Razor Pilot, and Waiting for Engines is forgettable.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about overall rating on this record. Worthy album, better EP, or decent single? Where do you land?
I'm going to go with a worthy album. I just mentioned 3 songs that, are not amazing. I think it's a dip in the record. They're not unlistenable. I don't reach for the skip button when they come on. They're just not as compelling. So that said, I think, and even at that, it's only 50 minutes. So I think it's a worthy record. Where are you at?
I agree with you. That's actually exactly what I had. Take those 3 songs out, because then it gets you down to 38, 39 minutes. That's a really good length for this kind of record. And I think the songwriting is just so strong on really the first 8 or 9 tracks. It's just the production that just does it in. And I know some people find that charming, but when I want that guitar to kick in and it doesn't, or the feedback or the squalls to not quite sound right.
Yeah.
So that's just the thing that's missing.
I don't know that this is. I'm looking at the sort of version I have here. It doesn't look like it's ever been remastered, but
no,
it sounds like a record that you probably have more on the tape there, and that it could be improved quite a bit with a remix and a remaster. Sometimes you listen to a record, you're like, there's no saving this, but there's enough songs on here where you're like, okay, yeah, that doesn't sound too bad. That makes me think that they may have gotten the takes. It's just through the mix and the mastering, somehow it just didn't come together.
Right.
And it could be improved.
Well, we need to thank Mike Bond for submitting this. We also need to thank Richard Waterman, Eric Peterson, Willie Dillon, Kyle Bittner, Scott Neiman, Joe, Adam Smith, and Jeff Petrin for making suggestions. If you would like to be like these folks, go on to digmeoutpodcast.com, find the suggest an album button, go to the web form, complete the web form, and then it will go into our hopper. And at some point in the future, we will get to it, unless we've already done it by that point. You never know. That could be, that's just one of the ironies of life right there. You suggest an album and it gets done before you get picked. And then just you know what? You just get back on your horse and you submit another album. You might want to slip more than one at a time. This is a long time to wait between albums if you're waiting, because these aren't happening overnight. Also want to tell folks, if you want to vote in these polls, go to dmounion.com or digmeoutunion.com. Join the union for a couple bucks a month. You get to vote in the polls. You get you get access to our Discord, where all the chatter happens about the various things, the goings-ons.
Yeah. If you're thinking to yourself, I'm not sure I want to hang out on this Twitter place anymore, we might have a solution for you.
We might have what we call a curated and thoughtful, homogeneous. I don't know how to say it, but
It's
all a bunch of dudes who like music and dudes and ladies who like music.
It's people,
but mostly
polite.
chill people.
Just like to nerd out about how much they love music. Nothing else. That's it.
So maybe that's a community that you'd like to be a part of.
No shouting.
No
billionaire.
Everybody's done by 9 p.m. You go off and you go to bed. We don't want anybody chatting after 9.
I don't know. We've got quite a few people in Australia and
that's
UK,
true.
So.
They need their chance. So, and lastly, not lastly, box newsletter. Go to digmeoutpodcast.com to sign up for that, and you get an email once a week from us with a list of the new releases of the week, including 2 new reviews of albums, TV shows, books, movies, documentaries relevant to 80s and 90s music. That's right. We're telling you about new stuff, not just old stuff. And you go sign up for the box, and you get to read that at Patreon as well. And you find all that about what's going on. Apple Podcasts, that's where you say nice things about us. You already know that, because you've listened to all 597 episodes before this, or whatever it is. So I'm sure if I go and check, we should have, Jay, how many people do you think has left a review by this point? 1.5 million? 1.8? Are we pushing 2 million reviews yet?
Easy.
Okay. Well, I don't want to pile on, but if people do want to continue to pile on, that's fine.
Yeah. I mean, hey, if you're not able to join us at Patreon, that's cool. Just head on over to Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star.
We'd greatly appreciate it. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button. Oh no, sorry. That's
oh Jesus. Don't ever say that. I don't think either of us ever have the energy to be YouTube stars.
No. All right. For non-YouTube stars, Jay and that guy and Tim, me, we're out. We'll be back next week with another episode of Dig Me Out.